Hello everyone, this is Erik, the Asian movie enthusiast, and this is part 2 of my Takashi Miike filmography review. Now looking back to part 1, I covered 11 movies in that video, the vast majority of which were not worth watching. They weren't. But most fortunately, that trend will change tonight, because I'm going to cover 9 films this evening, only a few of which I think are outright duds. So we got some good stuff tonight. So yes, the vast majority of these titles tonight are worth watching, I believe. And remember, all of the movies that I discuss will be listed in the description box below. Now, our first film tonight was the first Miike film that was specifically made for theatrical distribution. However, this would not mark the end of Miike's direct-to-video or made-for-television productions because he would pepper more of those into his future filmography, along with the theatrical stuff, of course. So let's take a look at Shinjuku, Triad Society from 1995. This is a crime drama. So this is the first film in Miike's Black Society trilogy, which also includes Rainy Dog from 1997 and Ley Lines from 1999. So Shinjuku Triad Society recounts the criminal activities of a homosexual triad group and their interactions with a renegade police officer as well as opposing Yakuza organizations. When the younger brother to a cop becomes a lawyer for the triad group, an argument between the brothers leads to the downfall of the organization. The high-level plot touches upon black market organ dealing, but this is mostly focused on the characters and their interaction. And let me tell you, all of the characters come out looking bad in this one. They are not nice people, and that includes the protagonist. So right from the start, the viewer is subjected to some grungy back alley sex and bloody violence. Then we get a body cavity search and an illegal beating inflicted by the main protagonist. Oh yeah, our main protagonist is doing some illegal beatings, and they're not fun to watch. All of this before the opening credits finish. So this is pretty abrasive stuff, I think, this film, but it sets the gritty, uncomfortable tone that continues throughout and adds a lot of back alley griminess. This proves to be one of Shinjuku Triad Society's most defining features, I believe, and it actually helps to make it memorable and interesting to watch. There is a lot of sexual content in this film as well, some of which does feel necessary, but after a while, I think it gets a little repetitive and gratuitous. For example, there are at least half a dozen scenes featuring oral sex, and there are multiple scenes of people extracting confessions out of other people by raping them in the rear end. Now, I'm a fan of many films that most people would consider to be too perverted or sexually charged for a mentally normal person. But there's a line that the filmmakers still need to walk in order to keep it relevant and engaging. And I do think that Shinjuku Triad Society becomes unnecessarily excessive in spots. Just in my opinion there. And while we're getting the criticisms out of the way, this is fairly deliberately paced. It's a crime drama, of course. And it does have some pacing issues, I think, especially during the middle section. Nothing too debilitating, but things do get a little bit dull near the midpoint, I think. But there's a lot of positives to this film, in addition to the stuff I already mentioned regarding the, the gritty aura about it. I previously mentioned that the protagonist was not a nice person, but he's still a bit of a mixed bag in terms of likability. You don't outright hate this guy, because there are some flashes of responsibility and kindness to him, mostly directed towards his parents, and that creates some multidimensionality that I appreciated. There are also multiple cultures shown within the criminal underworld. Chinese, Taiwanese, Thai, mixed bloods, etc. The lead protagonist actually has a Chinese mother and a Japanese father, which establishes the oft-explored theme of the rootless individual in cultural and or an ethnic sense that this director would revisit in future films. Again, that Tom Mess book, Agitator, goes into great detail regarding this theme, and I recommended that in my introduction video, so definitely take a read of that one. But the basic gist is that this cop has difficulty fitting into either culture, hence the rootless individual. and that theme of rootlessness applies to some of the supporting characters as well. One of the more recognizable actors here, at least for non-Japanese viewers, is Tomohiro Taguchi, who previously starred in Tetsuo the Iron Man. It's Tetsuo himself. Here he plays a demented, sadistic criminal boss who also flashes people. Nice to see him here. I always liked seeing him in flicks. So in summary, Shinjuku Triad Society is not the strongest film of the Black Society trilogy in my opinion, for reasons that I previously mentioned, but it's definitely interesting and worth a watch for viewers who can handle, gritty, sleazy movies. In fact, it's close to a must-see in my opinion, if you're a fan of Miike or you simply want the complete Miike experience, mostly because it marked an important creative turning point in his career. This is a film that kind of exhibits more of his more well-known stylistic flourishes, I guess you could call them. And I do plan on rewatching this film in the future. You know what I mean? I enjoy it. In fact, I recently purchased the trilogy for my collection, as I showed in my DVD collection videos, which everyone should be watching, by the way. I don't mention them enough, because a lot of my favorite movies are showcased in my DVD collection playlist. So if you have not watched that playlist, make sure you check that out. There's a lot of recommendations for you. Now, in terms of availability, Shinjuku Triad Society is widely available on DVD in the United States. And like I said, I mentioned the trilogy box set that just came out earlier this year. It's a nice spiffy box set. Again, check out my DVD collection video. Probably one of the later Japanese parts would have that. I recommend it. Alright, so we've now reached 1996 in Takashi Miike's filmography. A busy year, it would seem, because this director released 6 movies in 1996 alone. That's pretty crazy. So let's check them out. First one here is called The Way to Fight, a Japanese drama comedy. Now, Wikipedia has a nice summary of this one, so I'll paraphrase here. Set in Osaka in the 1970s, a teenage street fighter named Kazuyoshi builds a reputation as the toughest guy in town. His troubles start when he discovers that he and his best friend Toshio are in love with the same girl, Ritsuka. Then he crosses paths with Takeshi, a student at a rival high school and an excellent fighter in his own right, who is the leader of a gang of assaulters. So Kazuyoshi is determined to challenge Takeshi one-on-one, but because of a series of unforeseen circumstances, his ambition for a final battle is constantly and comically thwarted. Now, going into this, it's important to understand the following things that will help to adjust your expectations, especially if you've only seen a few of Miike's films. 1. This movie lacks any of the crazy shenanigans of some of Miike's more popular films. 2. It's a slow-paced drama comedy hybrid that portrays the main rivalry in a playful manner. 3. There are some coming-of-age moments during the opening half. And 4. The focus here is mostly on character interaction over story. Now, this film is actually steeped in Osaka culture and almost exaggerates the people of that particular city. The people of Osaka, in general, are kind of considered to be down-to-earth and perhaps less, prim and proper when compared to a place like Kyoto. If you ever travel to Japan, by the way, you will go to Kyoto because it's a requirement. But I also recommend that you check out Osaka afterward. It's a short train ride from Kyoto, but the differences in culture are fairly easy to see, even for, a first-time visitor. And even if you're only visiting for a handful of days. So if you're looking for a movie that showcases that Osaka culture, The Way to Fight will be up your alley, I think. Now, the first time I saw this movie, I was not particularly fond of it. The acting is very expressionistic at times, which I think was the thing that rubbed me the wrong way at first, because this is a film that's mostly rooted in reality, really. And the acting just kind of, I don't know, it kind of clashed with that tone for me. But after a second viewing, I did not think it was as big of a problem. It's definitely there, but I found it rather amusing, actually. And I'm glad that I rewatched it for this Miike Filmography project, because I may not have rewatched it otherwise, because overall I enjoyed this movie a little bit more. Overall, I mean, it's It's simply a pretty good drama that has a nice mix of lighthearted and more serious moments. The fact that our two lead characters arrange multiple fights against one another throughout the film, yet are always like sidetracked by something outside of their means that kind of delays their duel, is quite interesting and humorous, I thought. Kazuki Kitamura is the second lead actor here. He was also the second lead in the Indonesian-Japanese co-production Killers from 2014, and he's one of the few recognizable faces in this one. This isn't a loaded cast or anything. In fact, a few of the actors in this movie I don't think I've seen in anything else. But they all do a pretty good job. One last observation I would like to make is that The Way to Fight was direct-to-video, but it feels like a theatrical film. We're definitely at the time period where Miike started hitting his stride as a director. There's still a lot of misses he's going to have, but at least he started making a higher percentage of good movies compared to bad ones, so that's good. So overall, I enjoyed The Way to Fight. If you want kind of a quaint coming-of-age film, this could be up your alley. And it is widely available on DVD in the United States. A lot of Miike's films are widely available or easy to find, which is really nice. You know, that first video I did, some of them were, a majority of them were a little difficult to find, but from now on, a good chunk of them you'll be able to find. Alright, our next one here is the new third Yakuza, 1 and 2. Okay, this is also known as Shin Daisan no Gokudo from 1996. It's crime, drama, action. So these are two more direct-to-video films by Miike that revolve around Yakuza. These are called the new third Yakuza films because they're actually sequels to the third Yakuza, also known as Daisan no Gokudo from 1995, also directed by Miike, but not covered in this playlist because I just have not been able to find that movie. But in any case, these sequels were shot back-to-back and presumably follow the story of the first film. It's a basic gangster conflict between a number of characters, and there were a few brief flashbacks near the beginning to help new viewers out a bit, so that helped. Our protagonist is a Yakuza who forms an alliance with a former rival, but that of course causes some infighting within the group. One particular gangster does everything he can to drive the protagonist out of the group for good. Now, if I were to describe these two films by one word, and one word only, it would be bland, unfortunately. There are a few decent moments here or there, but the plot, the characters, the action, mostly run-of-the-mill stuff. It references the aftermath of the Kobe earthquake from 1995, which is a pretty big event for Japan in the 1990s. But it doesn't really do much with that event. I would have liked more emphasis on that event and how it impacts the characters, but we don't really get too much of that, so I was kind of disappointed there. The protagonist, well acted, but kind of vanilla. The bad guys are wafer thin in terms of development. They're simplistic jerks, basically. And the resolution of the conflicts is kind of anticlimactic. There's very little excitement to mine out of this movie. Production values are low as expected from direct-to-video, and you get none of that Miike flair or energy to keep it engaging. There are a few sleazy moments, but only a few. Pacing of the second movie is even worse than the first one. So each film is about 85 minutes in length, but if you choose to watch them back-to-back, you may find yourself nodding off or daydreaming. These are not easy to sit through. They're not bad films, not bad films by any means. They got some decent stuff in there, but I don't know. They're really not worth seeking out if you haven't seen them. Performances are sufficient. Not that many glaring flaws outside of the ones that I mentioned in terms of script writing or plot holes especially, but it's mostly forgettable stuff. If you're a huge Miike fan, give them a shot if you can find them, but don't feel bad if you miss out on them. In terms of availability, the new third Yakuza 1 and 2, difficult to find, unfortunately. Alright. Got a big one now. As I mentioned earlier, Miike started hitting his stride a bit during 95 and 96. We had Shinjuku Triad Society, The Way to Fight, which are two legitimate quality films. And now, we reach the first truly fantastic title in Miike's filmography, in my opinion. and that is Fudoh, The New Generation. This is a crime drama action flick. We're still in 96 here, still in 1996. Our protagonist is a man named Riki Fudoh, not to be confused with Ricky O, the legendary man with superhuman strength who appeared in that Hong Kong flick from 1991. No, our protagonist here is a young man whose appearance is quite misleading, actually. A highly cultured model high school student on the surface, but underneath lies a vicious and silent killer. Successor to the Fudoh family, Riki devises a plan to recruit his own criminal organization made up of fellow classmates. His goal? To brutally assassinate the old generation of Yakuza bosses and take control. Now, I read that this film was initially intended to direct release on video, but the producers thought it was so good that they gave it a theatrical release. And to that I would say, yes, this film is awesome. In fact, it is the 16th Miike film that we're covering in this playlist, unbelievably, and it's the best one so far, in my opinion. Is it the 16th film? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, it is. Man, we're churning through his filmography. All right, so we start this film off with a crazy bathroom hit that is quite, I don't know, how would you describe it? Almost high octane. It's a pretty intense scene. Then it's followed by another handful of memorable demented moments, which I won't spoil for you. I mean, the bloody carnage during the opening 40 minutes of this movie are absolutely outrageous and a boatload of fun to watch. But it's different, I think, than from some of Miike's other crazy openings that, from past and future years, which we'll get to. Because everything here seems to be based in reality, but at the same time we have some assassination skills that you could not see in real life. I mean, the schoolgirls, in particular, really steal the show in this with their unconventional weaponry. The point I'm trying to make is that, this movie is ridiculous without getting cartoonish, and that's a very charming quality. Tone here is unorthodox, mixes in some serious storylines with moments that would be more home in a grindhouse film. But one reason it works is because it never loses control of itself, and it actually contributes some very good script writing and character development, which you may not expect, given the plot synopsis I just gave you. As a viewer, you really do feel connected to these protagonists and care for their well-being. And tension, excitement, and dramatic weight are created even further because there are some powerful adversaries that are introduced near the midpoint. The acting in this movie is surprisingly good as well. Just a fantastic film that feels different from most other gangster films that you'll ever see. You simply must watch Fudoh, The New Generation. You do not have a choice in this matter. You have to watch it. Watch it. So Fudoh, fortunately, is widely available in the United States. No excuse to not watch that one. No excuses. There are plenty of excuses to skip the next one, though. Because our next film tonight is a huge step down from Fudoh. And that is Peanuts. A drama, comedy, action film from 96, of course. So two misfit brothers help a neighborhood shop owner who's in trouble with the Yakuza, then they get involved with some underworld dealings. The problem here is that our protagonists are not too bright, and this is apparent near the beginning of the film when they're conned out of their horse racing winnings and then become involved with some shady women. But fortunately, they have their fists and fighting skills to pave their way to victory. So this is another direct-to-video film that is quite simply boring to watch and contributes no memorable moments. There's some gratuitous nudity there, and the humor does not work very well. Riki Takuchi plays one of the leads, which you would think would be a selling point here, and at least we get that much. Even in a bad direct-to-video film, Riki still does his thing, He always tries his best, but his character simply is not developed properly, or even that interesting, believe it or not. There's a distinct lack of charming character interaction in this, too, especially considering how this is partly a comedy. Action is just run-of-the-mill stuff, generic. Production values give a cheap feel to everything. I really have nothing more to say about Peanuts. It's so forgettable that my brain has deleted most of it from my memory. But the characters do have nice hats. I'll give them that much. There's some pretty It's pretty suave hats that are featured in this movie. So if you haven't seen Peanuts, I would not worry about it. It's, it's pretty unimpressive. And it is also difficult to find, so you may not have a choice. Again, probably something I saw on YouTube that, eventually got taken down. All right. We got 2 films here that are in the same series. We have a film and its sequel coming up. And that is called Ambition Without Honor, also known as Jingi Naki Yabo, 1996, crime drama action. So after serving 7 years in prison for stabbing a rival Yakuza, a young man meets his girlfriend, who has spent years working a stable job and saving money for both of them to move away and start a new life. Our protagonist has different plans, however, because he wants to rejoin the gang. He soon realizes that there have been rampant turnover in the family, meaning that the new blood doesn't even know him very well. In addition, the financial stability of the group has deteriorated due to the economy, so if all that weren't bad enough, our protagonist's father works for a rival Yakuza organization. So things aren't looking too good here. Well, this is more direct-to-video stuff from Miike. A lot of direct-to-video films tonight, isn't there? We knocked it off. We hit it off with Shinjuku Triad Society, and then after that, we've had a bunch of direct-to-video stuff. But most of it's pretty good, though. And this one is, too. This has a bit more energy to it, and is also focused mostly on the protagonist instead of bouncing around into too many side characters, which can be a problem in films like this. You can understand the protagonist's frustrations, too. Because he spent 7 years in prison for a criminal organization that has no intentions of compensating him. I'd be mad, too. You know what I mean? So the strong conflict results in some dramatic impact to this as well, which obviously helps in the films such as this. The theme here is father-son relationships, and it's explored to a degree. Performances are good enough, with the lead actor being sufficient, albeit nothing special. Action is pretty good here. It's pretty good. There's one memorable car stunt involving a man getting run over, which was pretty interesting. That one kind of surprised me. There's some other sufficiently violent moments as well. Like, for example, the film begins with a scrappy but effectively shot murder of a crime boss. But I would say the biggest flaw of Ambition Without Honor is probably its overall generic feel. It's not creative, like Fudoh, The New Generation, and it lacks the aesthetic grime of something like Shinjuku Triad Society or Takashi Miike's Gonin films that were released around the same time period. And since there are better traditional Yakuza flicks out there, Ambition Without Honor does not really distinguish itself much from the pack. But with that said, it works well enough as a genre film, and it's moderately entertaining in my opinion. And Ambition Without Honor, the first one, is available on YouTube with subtitles, so you can check it out. Excuse me. Now let's go to the sequel here. There was a sequel made to this movie, and it is called Ambition Without Honor 2, also known as Jingi Naki Yabo 2, and this was made in the subsequent year, so we've moved on to 1997 now. And of course, this is a crime drama action film. Now, the ending to the first Ambition Without Honor film kind of felt like a big setup for a sequel, actually, but this film is not a continuation of that story. Instead, it's connected thematically, not plot-wise. And that's important to understand going into this. The same lead actor returns, but instead of being the naive Yakuza wannabe from the first film, he now plays a man who is more streetwise and mature. After his adopted father, who is the head of a Yakuza group, is assassinated by a rival clan, our protagonist butts heads with the rival faction. Now, the positives and the negatives of this film are very similar to its predecessor, actually. For example, the generic plot and characters are probably its biggest flaw. Pacing has some slow patches as well, but it does have sufficient acting and strong conflicts to keep the viewer engaged. Action is on the light side in the sequel, but there's a fun scene involving dynamite and a bloody finale, which is quite entertaining because of its high body count, and the fact that it involves guns and samurai swords in the same scene. So that's pretty cool. It's definitely the highlight of the film, I think. This one seemed to have a few splashes of color as well, a little bit more style at certain times, at least in terms of lighting. I liked watching the urban environments at night, and, this has a few nice images to look at in that regard. So, in case you were wondering, you do not need to watch these films in order, but if you saw and enjoyed the first Ambition Without Honor film, you would probably like this one as well. It's pretty good stuff. Not a high priority item in Miike's filmography, but you could certainly do worse, as you've seen already. So I recommend the sequel, Ambition Without Honor 2. This one, unfortunately, is difficult to find. No one has uploaded it on YouTube recently. But, keep looking out for it. It'll pop up again. All right. Our last film tonight is a film called Young Thugs, Innocent Blood. It's one of those slower-paced coming-of-age dramas that Miike likes to do. It's similar in some ways to The Way to Fight, which we covered earlier in this video. So here, Miike gives us a story about some delinquent youths. Set in Kishiwada, a fishing district in the industrial section of Osaka, this follows a romantic couple, Richie and Ryoko, through their first few years after leaving high school. So, after having robbed their teacher on their last day at school, because they find those things fun to do, Ryoko gets a job in a hair salon while Richie continues his fighting ways while working as a street vendor. Conflict between our protagonists almost immediately surfaces when an attractive girl shows up and seduces Richie, who has unfortunately become bored with Ryoko. Now, can our crew stick together, or will they have a falling out? The opening scene in Innocent Blood I thought was rather funny, so it starts off on the right track, with a flower pot getting dropped on a teacher's head. The opening 15 minutes actually start off very strong in terms of its sense of nostalgia, okay, and that sets the tone for the rest of the film. The theme seems to be a coming-of-age one as well, with the contemplation of whether you liked who you were in your youth and whether you like who you are becoming as an adult. So, these characters are in that transitional phase, and they're having some problems just kind of figuring out what path they want to take, you know what I mean? None of this cast is particularly well known, similar to The Way to Fight, but Kazuki Kitamura shows up again here, who starred in Killers again not too long ago, as I mentioned. He has a few short scenes in this one as the protagonist's street-fighting nemesis. It's one of those slice-of-life films in Miike's portfolio. Slow-paced, lacking in a complicated plot. You don't need that here. But it does focus quite a bit on the character interaction and development. There are a few very short bursts of violence that are associated with the street fights, but most of those scenes are important for the themes and characters, and there's nothing like graphic here or anything. In terms of mood, it's quite a downer of a film, actually, for most of its runtime, mostly because the characters are all very unhappy with their lives, and are still attempting, like I said, to figure stuff out. In terms of flaws, comedy is kind of hit or miss. It starts off with a funny scene. Some of the humor later on, it was just okay, but there's some funny stuff too. So I would say the film also does kind of run out of gas a bit during the second half, a little bit. But this is definitely worth watching. It's a good movie. So Young Thugs, Innocent Blood is moderately available on DVD in the United States. You can find it pretty easily, but I don't know if they're still printing discs. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if it's going out of print or not, because it doesn't seem to be as highly available as it used to be. So yeah, we had some pretty good stuff tonight. I would say Shinjuku Triad Society, definitely a solid film to watch. If you can handle some grime and sleaze, if that kind of thing puts you off, I would say you almost still have to watch it, but, tread lightly, tread cautiously. Fudoh, The New Generation, gotta watch it. No choice. Then you have some of these other films, like the coming-of-age films. If you want some of that, check out The Way to Fight and Young Thugs, Innocent Blood. Two quality coming-of-age films with, they're slow-paced dramas, but they're interesting. And then, of course, we have Ambition Without Honor 1 and 2, which, don't have wide distribution in the United States, but if you can find the one on YouTube and you like it and you can track down the other one, it's worth a watch. So, Yeah, not a bad lineup of stuff tonight. I think every video we're going to kind of improve, at least in the foreseeable future here. So be sure to join me for part 3 of my Takashi Miike filmography review. So we're going to cover even more cool stuff. I would say there's probably 3 must-sees in the next video. 3 must-sees. So check it out. And as always, I will see you next time.